Mr. Shyam Saran does not need an introduction. He's been personally and selfishly, without actually trying to say who I am, because I'm nobody, has inspired me from the first time I met him in Bombay. And actually, really, his thinking is what really excites me. And a lot of the things that he said, and I still remember in the Copenhagen conference when he talked about glaciers and other melting snows, etc. I think people were not ready enough to receive this. But I think it's over to Mr. Saran to give his views, to have this conversation so that we get, I think, more enlightened and see how we can implement some of these things. I don't think we can solve the global crisis, but we can definitely try and solve a local crisis based on the kind of ecosystem impact that we could have or will have. Over to you.
So, as I was trying to put across to you that, we have to first look at all the dense interdependencies that exist as far as the whole planetary ecology is concerned. Every part of our planet is linked to another part of the planet. So even though these are different geographical locations, they are all linked together ultimately. But yes, each geographical region also has its own particularities, just as the kind of focus that you have been providing on the Eastern Himalayas. The Eastern Himalayas have a certain integrity as a kind of important ecological space, but it is part and parcel of a much larger mountain zone stretching from the Pamirs right up to the edge of Burma. Actually, the Himalayas actually extend into Burma as well. So we have to look at this mountainscape as a single kind of ecological space. And the other aspect which perhaps people forget is that they treat mountains or rivers or forests as inanimate objects, as they are like dead wood in a sense. They are not. They are all living systems, as living as you and I are.
Right.
And if we concede that these are also living systems, then you cannot chop up living systems into pieces of property.
Right.
Which is what happens when you have a nation states with hard boundaries. This part is mine. On across the border on the other side is yours. As far as these systems are concerned, actually political boundaries are irrelevant. So we have to get that message across. That when we are looking at the mountains, when we are talking about conservation, when we are talking about how do we ensure that the melting of the glaciers does not take place, because we know what will happen with respect to just the perennial rivers, which are so important not just to the Himalayan states, but they are important for the whole Indo-Gangetic plain in India. So you have to have that perspective that these are living systems. They cannot be chopped up and shared. And therefore, the only hope that we have of being able to tackle some of the crises that we are facing is by having collaboration, cross-border collaboration amongst the countries which share these ecological assets. Right. So, with respect to the Himalayas or the third pole, you need to have all the countries which share the Himalayas, who are in a sense the legatees of this huge, treasure house. All the countries of the Himalayan zone, all the communities of the Himalayan zone, the people who inhabit this zone, they have to be able to work together. So unless you create that kind of a platform where people recognize that this is both a shared space, but it's also a shared challenge. And the only way that we can deal with the shared challenge is by collaborating. And that is the collaboration which is missing. The one thing that I would like to add at this point is that, I have been a diplomat, I have been in the business of, negotiating for my country's interests. But I can tell you that the kind of catastrophe which we will confront if we do not deal with this shared ecological crisis through collaboration. The consequences will be much worse than the kind of consequences of political conflicts that are taking place amongst the countries of the region. We are looking at our interests in very, very narrow terms. What we are not recognizing is that the alternative to not collaborating is far worse than our putting aside some of our differences and actually coming together.
No, thank you for that. But I think, let me just go into a hornet's nest. Just as the leadership that you provided in diplomacy, I don't believe that when I talk to diplomats on both sides of the border or in all the 4 or 5 borders that are there, that they are actually, their deliverables, they're not measured in terms of their confidential reports on actually ecology and what its value is. What have they done for the sharing of these natural assets? Because of a parallel reason, there is no value. People talk about trade value, people talk about GDP, but people do not talk about this.
Not marketable value.
Not marketable value. And therefore, I don't see the person who represents us in these countries are not people who talk about the ecological togetherness or ecological collaboration that we require to make this happen. More than that, Partha Dasgupta's book on this economics of biodiversity, and in fact, later I did an article in the Scientist magazine talking about this biodiversity equation, say in Bhutan, China, India, and Burma, and said, look, if we actually valued this would be much more valuable than just the border management of what he said, very much like what you say. But the issue is that you as a top diplomat, did you actually tell your diplomat that this is something you'll have to deliver, 10% will go or 20% of your value would go?
No, I very frankly, that does not figure into our assessments of the performance of diplomats. But that is because, as I mentioned to you, that the brief with which diplomats go to, for example, negotiating conferences is a very simple brief. Simple brief is you extract as much as you can and you give as little as possible. Right? Now, if everybody is working on that particular brief, and I'm sure that other countries' diplomats also have the same brief. You give as little as you can and you get as much as we can for our country. If we are working on that kind of a dynamic, then should it come as a surprise to you that we always end up as a least common denominator result. When the challenges we are facing require a maximal response, you end up by always having the minimal possible response.
But
so this is because the dynamic is different. Look at the pollution, for example, in Delhi. People ask, why is it that year after year we are not able to deal with this? Why is it that government which prides itself in being quite a powerful government with a powerful leader, why is it not able to do something about this perennial problem? It is because dealing with pollution, dealing with climate change is not a poll issue, is not an election issue. Have you seen, for example, any ecological issue, any environment issue figuring as a major plank in the canvassing for votes in the elections here? It doesn't. So this is why are diplomats not being valued on this? It is because the political leadership does not believe that this is an important issue.
No, but I think, sir, you
need to have what Nehru used to call enlightened self-interest. That is, yes, you should certainly pursue your own country's interests, but at the same time, you must frame it within the larger humanity, because you are also part of the larger humanity. So if something bad happens to that larger humanity, you are not insulated.
No, completely. But I think
so you should have that balance.
No, I agree. So if it's balance, I think if energy is one of the biggest polluters, you made a very big difference by actually maybe sticking to a brief or going out of the brief by saying that nuclear was important. You negotiated, you gave a win-win formula. It wasn't giving more or taking less. And yet, that nuclear, which was actually going to help in this environmental neutrality, is something that is not implemented yet, with so much drama, with democracy at play, with parliament actually almost losing that mandate that you had created, was something that you created. As a diplomat, if I looked at your balance sheet, I'd say you'd get 100 on 100 on that. But
I
what
doubt
happened?
it. But no, so
That's important.
the issue is this. For me also, this was a learning process. I had very superficial idea about climate change, from the time that I had attended the Rio Convention, 1992. That is when I first was exposed to, the whole issue of climate change. Let me also be very frank and truthful that when I was negotiating the nuclear deal, the climate aspect of the nuclear deal was not uppermost in my mind.
Right.
So when I started, it was how do I convince my interlocutors that it is a good thing to do this with India, do this deal with India.
Correct.
So the climate change came in as a good argument for me.
Yeah.
That look, by doing this, you are helping India shift away from fossil fuels.
Right.
Okay, so it was more a argument that I was using. But while I was using that argument and I became special envoy on climate change, then I started going much deeper into this whole idea of climate change. What could be the consequences? Then it became a much larger issue than just as an argument in a kind of a negotiating debate. And the more that I have looked at this over the last several years, both within government as well as outside government, I believe that we are really suffering from collective blindness. That even though this emergency is over, it's not something going to happen in the future, it is happening now. We can see
That's
it
true.
happening
That's
now.
true. That's true.
And yet, we don't want to do anything about it. Why? Because it will mean that we will need a different value system. Even in terms of not value system in a philosophical sense, but value in terms of what market value is.
Right.
That is, I give always this argument. Unless you have a system where a tree growing in a forest has greater value than a tree which is cut down and sold as timber, you will not be able to stop deforestation.
I completely agree.
Isn't it? So you need that marketable value also.
Yes.
These ecological services must be valued. They can be marketed. People by doing this are able to make a profit out of it.
Yeah.
So this is why that particular example is very important. How do I make sure that when I'm growing a tree, that growing tree is giving me greater value than what is happening most of the time in Amazon? Look at hundreds and hundreds of hectares of forest, virgin forest, are being cut down because that timber fetches you more money in the market than it is while still growing in the forest. Now, various methods have been tried. Okay, if you don't cut the forest, I'm going to give you so much aid. Right. But that is not market. That is giving an aid.
Correct.
I'm just giving you some money so that you don't do this. But it is not really answering the economic logic.
Right.
That must underlie, these efforts.
No, thank you. I think, we have a subject called naturenomics, the interdependence between nature and economics. And unless you bring about that kind of valuation, and we've talked a lot with Nick Stern, Partha, Joseph Stiglitz, yourself, in actually saying how do we craft something to it. So we made some attempts, and therefore most countries now have an ecological assessment system. And they say that actually by cutting it, the developmental agenda, which is socially driven, is much more. They talk about two things. One is the education component of the indigenous people, and two is the healthcare component through connectivity and therefore what they can do out of it. Therefore, to them, it's not industrialization, but development agenda means buildings. Development agenda means, schools. Development agenda means hospitals, hotels, tourism, by cutting your natural assets, because there is no value to natural assets, let alone biodiversity. The tree, as people say, they look at the tree, they don't know about the water security that it provides, the oxygen security. What's happening in Delhi, there are trees, but there's no water security. So you've got a big challenge in terms of this whole ecosystem. I wish the COPs concentrated on this. What do you think about COP 30, therefore, in valuation?
No, actually, depressing as it sounds, we have to acknowledge that the high point was 1992.
Yes.
The Rio Convention, where actually the world came together to first of all recognize that we are facing this crisis, but also importantly said that in order to deal with this, there has to be the principle of equitable burden sharing.
Yes.
That is, unless you have climate justice, you cannot deal with climate.
That's to the global north and south, that issue.
And so it was a recognition that in this particular crisis, we are all together, but we have to act according to a differentiated, evaluation of our capabilities, of our responsibility. So that was the last time that we had a truly multilateral, equitable approach to dealing with a global crisis. Recognizing that national efforts, unless matched with global efforts, will make no difference. So I give always the example. Today, our emissions are what? 7% of the total volume. Supposing tomorrow, by some miracle, I make it zero. I completely stop fossil fuel use and make it zero. Will climate change stop? It will not stop because others are still spewing carbon into the atmosphere.
15, 20, 30.
Yeah. So this is the interconnectedness. That asking me to do more doesn't mean very much unless you are ready to also do more yourself.
Completely.
Yeah. So what we are seeing happen is that those who are sitting on resources, they want to hold on to what they have, and they want to shift the burden of adjustment on others. So essentially, they are saying, I get to keep what I have because I got here first. You stay where you are because you are a latecomer.
Correct.
Now, on that principle, how can you deal with a global challenge? Not possible.
Not possible.
Yeah. So, from 1992 onwards, it has been a steady attrition process. Copenhagen was perhaps the last occasion where there was a stand made in favor of the common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities principle, which was the fundamental base of the Rio Convention.
Right.
And since then, it has been completely,
eroded.
Yeah,
you can see the chaos this time in COP 30.
So, I do not expect that COP 30 will come up with anything. In fact, even with respect to the Paris Agreement, which itself was a much diluted version of Rio Convention.
Yes.
It was actually completely eviscerated the Rio Convention.
Right.
Even that diluted framework, even that we are finding it difficult to adhere to.
Right. What would you say would be the next steps then? Meaning, if you were to do COP today, what should you say with the agenda, with what are the answers? Meaning, there is nothing from us to do that.
See, this is all about politics.
Yeah.
And unless there is a change in mindset, that is, why did I say collective blindness? Because those who are thinking that if I can somehow or the other make the other fellow pay more and me pay less, and somehow the problem will be dealt with, that simply will not happen. We are seeing that it is not happening.
Right.
So you have to have that kind of a change in mindset, both amongst the developed countries who have the resources, who have the technology. Today, you have actually the technology to be able to, if not tackle completely, eliminate, fossil fuels completely, certainly to bring about a major reduction. Look at solar. I mean, solar today is cheaper than per unit generated electricity from solar is cheaper than coal.
Correct.
So even economic logic actually tells you should be moving more and more towards solar. So why do you have, when that is what is happening, why do you have the major fossil fuel companies coming up with huge delegations to these COPs and lobbying for fossil fuel use to continue?
Right.
Opposing any effort on the part of the conference to say, yes, we have to make that shift from fossil fuels to renewables or to cleaner sources of energy. That is being retarded.
But you see, the point is, unless we actually work, everybody seems to have a solution in mind. For example, ECMOD was set up, back to mountains and back to Himalayas, was set up with this reason, for cross-border discussion. And ECMOD, based in Nepal, has not been able to actually drive this agenda. Meaning, you know the people well, and you've been there and you've helped it in many occasions. The question is, unless organizations like ECMOD and all take their definition of COP30 and the solutions forward, it won't happen. But they don't have the courage, because the cross-border people will say we'll stop funding.
Well, that is one aspect, but I think you cannot short circuit the requirement of actually mobilizing public awareness, mobilizing public effort. A lot of the ECMOD's work, or a lot of the work even of some of the UN agencies, is very technical oriented. They are doing a lot of studies, they are doing a lot of
Right,
work,
right.
the IPCC.
More reports and more reports.
Whole lot of scientists, get together and give you the best assessment possible as to what is happening. Those are important. I'm not saying that these are not important. But ultimately, unless that results in decisions being taken by politicians, and politicians will not take those decisions unless there is pressure from the public, from the people. If people also believe that their future and their aspiration should be, in fact, more fossil fuel growth, then where are you going to get any results? You have this country which has actually a very long tradition in its culture of sustainability. The fact is that we look upon nature as mother.
Correct.
Right? So you don't take from the mother more than she can regenerate. And nature regenerates. We have seen nature, how quickly it can regenerate. But you are on an overdraft at the moment. You are taking away more than you are giving back.
5-6 times more,
Exactly.
actually, than
Right.
what we have.
So even a country with those kind of traditions, that kind of culture, is not able to, bring those cultural values to the fore. So ultimately, what is this a crisis of? This is a crisis of values.
Absolutely.
So unless that value system by which we live, unless our aspirations brings about some kind of a shift. So Dr. Manmohan Singh, when we were launching the National Action Plan on Climate Change, said that yes, we want development, we want higher standard of living, but we should now have a different interpretation of affluence. Affluence should also include clean air to breathe.
Yes.
Affluence should also include clean water to drink,
Absolutely.
green grass to walk on.
Yeah.
These are also very invaluable parts of affluence. So we are not looking upon this, as you said, we don't value this. When the choice is between, high consumption of very, very, destructive kind, and this ecological value, we always go for this. Because the standards which have been set, the aspirations which have been set, is actually we are locked into that. So this is a much larger, philosophical question. It's also a question of, how do we interpret our own culture? So if you have, for example, today a government which says there was glory in the past of India, why don't you recapture that glory with respect to sustainability? Because perhaps the most valuable part of your tradition, of your culture, is that. You know.
No, that is
Yeah.
true. But I think, sir, while there are two, three comments you've made, and I was just grappling in my mind as to say, when you say people have to come with it, my friends in Eastern Himalayas, Arunachal, Assam, they have no idea what climate change is. They have no idea to say that don't use fossil fuel. They are struggling for daily life in terms of education. They all have the Harvard model in their mind: send my children to better colleges, better schools, whether it's healthcare, engineering, or general arts, and make sure that we get a car, we get a good bahu, and we get a house. I think the whole model is that. So in places which are still pure, where the pollution levels are less than 2% in most of the places in the Northeast, I think it is easily climbing up because of this lavishness of the model that we've spread of what actually life can be. So
Not
to
only
your
what
point
the definition of success is.
of what the definition of success is,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So
In fact,
definition of success is not that you have been able to, maintain
Yes.
the ecological integrity.
Completely.
Yeah.
That is the
Yeah.
reason I asked you about the diplomatic delivery, not so much to put the diplomats, it's true of IAS officers when you go to a district, etc., etc. I think unless we change this model, it won't happen. I was at a college, where we were hoping that you'd come for our forum 25. And in that college, I asked them, how many of you are studying ecology to actually get an employment? There were 1,500 people, not one put up their hand. I'm saying that if somebody went to their parents and saying, I want to become a forest officer, how many of them will actually say yes? So it's not an attractive thing like IT, it's not attractive like accounting, it's not attractive like business generation or scientist. So how do we make our education systems that much more relevant so that it actually offers and throws up employment opportunities? Because if you look at the graph, we've reached that point, to your point, where we are expending all our assets. So we've reached that point where the next revolution has to be the ecological revolution. We've got digital, we've got technology, we've got industrial, we've got agricultural. But actually the next revolution has to be that.
So the answer to that particular dilemma that you are raising, the way things are going, and you are perhaps far more aware of the kind of ecological damage that is taking place, the overdraft becoming bigger and bigger, because you are right at the very edge of this very, very lush kind of ecology that the whole of
Great
India's
natural
north is.
value.
Yeah. If you don't make the change by choice, you will end up by having to make that change by compulsion. That is, nature will force you
Absolutely, you're right.
to confront.
Correct. You always talk about the Dehradun landslides and the Uttarakhand. All that is what
So
is forcing people to
it
change.
is very clear. Unless you deal with this, and unless you have an awareness of what it can mean, if you do not make a change in your lifestyles, in the manner in which you're looking at your aspirations, you will be forced to,
That's true.
because there
That's
is no other way.
Yeah.
So what is the challenge that is before, say, people like you who are doing this kind of conference? How do you get people to understand it is far better for you to make a choice rather than have to do this by compulsion? That the success that you are looking at, the aspirations that you have, I do not say that those aspirations are not valid. Everybody should have good education. Everybody should have a good job. True. I mean, I'm not contesting that. But then that has to be reconciled with this larger ecological question, because if you don't deal with this will be irrelevant, or your aspirations become irrelevant.
I completely
Yeah.
agree with that.
So how do we get that message across?
How do we get that?
Yeah.
I think, sir, in fact, it's a pity you're not coming there. For the first time, I think for many people in Asia, we in Balipara Foundation have taken saying that our target audience is students and academia. So all our conferences, energy and water is in IIT, biodiversity is in Cotton University, the entire thing of inland water and inland land usage is in Guwahati University, and Royal Global is the corporatization of world and what are the product choices you need. Is Coca-Cola really important? Are they helping in actually saving water? Are they helping in saving waste? Meaning, are these organizations doing it? So we've got 4 different days, and all the days are full because we suddenly find that there are so many people wanting to take it. So we're trying to say, how do we actually beautify and make this the new IT
Yeah.
of the world?
That is, this should be your aspiration.
Right.
A different set of aspirations.
Completely.
And also, I think you can do this by pointing out. I mean, you said, I want a good bahu, I want a good car to go around with. So today in India, the density of car population is something like 20 or 25 per thousand of population.
Right.
You already see, even with this limited number of vehicles, what kind of situation
Chaos.
you have ended up with. Okay. In US, you have more than 1,000 per thousand of population. In Europe, you have 800 per thousand of population. But the population is much smaller. Here you have a massive population of 1.4 billion people.
Yeah.
Now, if you aspire to the same level of car ownership that Europe, for example, enjoys, or even a fraction of that, not all the fossil fuels in the world, not all the real estate available to you can park those cars, not all the highways that you build are there for you to use those cars. It is simply not possible. So there is also a limit to the kind of aspirations we are looking at. Secondly, if you are looking at those kind of aspirations, the fact is that only a small number of people can enjoy this. And who also have tremendous amount of clout, political clout. So you saw in Delhi, 13% of the population only has access to private vehicles.
Right.
87% of the people either go by public transportation, by bicycle, or just walk. Now, if all your investment is actually focused on providing greater, flyovers for these cars, you can't even have a bus lane because they lobby against a bus lane, saying, our traffic is being slowed. So even the bus lanes, if you remember, that were functioning in Delhi, were done away with.
Correct.
Because of the tremendous clout of this 13% of the population. So what I'm trying to point out is that also there is an issue of what kind of society you are going to end up with. Are you going to end up with a society where there is a small group of very highly privileged, highly entitled elite, and you have a rest of the population which has very little access to even basic resources? So, there are many other issues that are linked up with this. It is not just only an ecological issue.
No.
It is also how you deal with this, also has tremendous implications for the kind of society we want to be. It is completely incompatible with a democratic society.
Completely. But if you look at China, they are actually moving in, and if you see what Xi Jinping is doing, he calls it actually the ecological revolution. Much after I thought, I don't know how they have a similar kind of thinking or how I may have learned from them. The ecological revolution, he said that science and development will lead to ecological neutrality. So whether you look at his policies of actually clean water, if you look at his foliage policy, if you look at his policy of education, healthcare, science, is completely well ahead of anybody else and not linked necessarily with carbon. So what he, his son, said is the ecological revolution follows the digital revolution, which follows the technology revolution, which follows industrial and which follows agriculture. So he's mapped it out quite well.
Well, he may have mapped it out, but I mean, China is a very complicated country.
Yeah.
So what you are seeing is there is a parallel development of fossil fuel along with very, very impressive development of renewable energy.
Right.
Very rapid expansion of nuclear energy. So you have segments which are very progressive and really addressing the kind of ecological crisis that we are talking about. But at the same time, on a parallel track, you still have a massive, massive fossil fuel based industry. They are, after all, the largest purchaser of the world's oil. They are the largest consumer. Their coal-based thermal power is still the mainstay of their energy system. And even today, they are sometimes adding more coal-based thermal power than the total energy capacity of, for example, the UK. So it is a bit of a contradictory situation, but that is because the whole situation is a bit contradictory.
Correct, correct. Nobody is saying that one system is to be rewarded. And in China's
It
case,
is,
they're running it
they
parallel, if
they
you ask
are
me.
in a sense saying, let us keep various options open.
Right.
You know, if we prematurely give up fossil fuel, then we may end up with a crisis. If we don't build up our renewable energy, that also we may end up with a crisis. So they are trying to, what they call, walking on two legs. We are in a transitional phase, and therefore it does not make sense for us, to opt just entirely for one or the other. Let us see what the trajectory is going to be. Now, if you look at the last several years, there has actually been a kind of a retreat. Even Europe, which has had a good story to tell with regard to dealing with climate change, they have started restarting some of their coal-based thermal power. Now, people say artificial intelligence is going to actually provide you all the answers you need, because you are actually now creating a super intelligence, which can provide you with solutions to this ecological crisis that humans can't even think about. But in the meantime, in order to develop that artificial intelligence, you need massive, massive amounts of energy, and you simply do not have renewable energy enough to deal with that. So what is happening? Those data centers which are being set up, which are using massive amount of power, you cannot but go back to coal. And that is what is happening, say, in the United States of America.
It's happening in Assam. We are putting up 2 coal plants because the country mandates that we actually need more energy, which is right. And therefore, coal is the answer.
So what choice you make, for that energy that you require, will have a major implications for the nature of development. So artificial intelligence, by the time artificial intelligence starts looking for solutions, there may not be a problem left to solve.
And that may be true. That is actually true. No, that's true. See, on that note, maybe I think there are 3-4 messages. Actually, this is really a request to you to really tell the audience that what should they expect from the Eastern Himalayan Naturenomics Forum, given the wide-ranging indications that you've given. And therefore, that if you can give us a message of 5-10 minutes as to what are the 5 things we should focus on. We're focusing on the people, we're focusing on academia, we're focusing on corporates so that they can implement. We're also focusing on energy and water. But what else should we do, and how deeper should we go on this? So this is really over to you.
So my own experience has been that if you want to make any headway in trying to promote conservation in the Himalayan zone, you need to take local communities along. And local community knowledge, indigenous knowledge systems can sometimes be very helpful in terms of dealing with these kind of issues, because they have been dealing with this and actually living this sustainable life for several generations. Therefore, there is an accumulated knowledge system there, which, because we are so embedded in the Western science and technology system, that we think this is not really very worthwhile. I think there is a big case for giving this message that in whatever we are doing with respect to these kind of conferences, the indigenous communities, local knowledge systems must be also part and parcel of this exercise. So that is one aspect. That without community involvement and participation, somebody coming from outside and saying this is what you should do, I'm afraid that does not always work. The second point I would like to make is that, we have got into a kind of a frame of mind that, look, if we want development, we have to do some sacrifice of ecology, of environment. There is a trade-off, to put it in very simple terms. I think what message has to go is that actually it is not a trade-off. The very objective of ensuring development, sustainable development over a longer period of time, requires you to adopt a development which is, as I said, sustainable, which is sensitive to the demands of ecology. Absolutely. Even very simple things, like, for example, when we were trying to flesh out the Himalayan mission in the action plan on climate change. Now, I went and visited a large number of Himalayan states, talked to the chief ministers, local communities. Now, even the laws which are there are not being observed. To give you an example, okay, maybe we do need a hydroelectric power, project to generate electricity. There are these fast-flowing rivers, which are
run of the river, etc.
However, when you are constructing a dam and you are doing a whole lot of earthwork, where does all that debris go? Now, according to the law, that debris must be removed, and that is the responsibility of the contractor, whoever is the project, company. Most places I went to, debris was still lying there, or it was just dumped into the river itself.
Right.
So what was happening? In many places, upper reaches were waterlogged, lower reaches, no water, because all the natural drainage systems had been blocked. Correct. Now, at least this can be addressed. So, even the laws which are there, why are they not being observed? So, this accountability issue is also very important. That, yes, maybe we need a road, but how do we make that road? Blasting in the Himalayas, according to law, should have a gap of at least 12 kilometers. One blasting site should be at least 12 kilometers from the next blasting site. Ordinarily, actually, it is being carried out at 3 kilometers, distance.
Right.
Why? Because there is a pressure to finish that project quickly.
Right.
Now, you can imagine what will happen to what is still a shifting terrain,
right,
which is a loose kind of terrain,
right,
if you have this kind of blasting.
Right.
And you can see the impact of that. So, should we not have a code of conduct with regard to actually the implementation of these kind of projects, and which are very, very strictly observed, and there is very strict accountability.
Correct.
Because if you go with the message, no dams, no roads, nothing, you will not get
any traction.
The time.
No,
but I think this aspect certainly you can get
of course
traction. So can for example, the forum, start looking at some kind of a code of conduct
Right.
that you can put in place, or you can recommend to policymakers, that even if you have to do development projects like roads or dams or various other things, what are the kind of measures or safeguards that you must have in place.
No, that's
That
very
is
good.
second thing. The third thing, as I said, is the kind of awareness that needs to be built up. It will not be a one-time exercise. So you will need several of these conferences to be able to create the kind of awareness of the direction in which a dead end that we are actually going towards.
That's true.
And this is something which people want to turn their face away from.
Yeah.
Because
Nobody
it
likes
is-
problems now.
Yeah. So you have to, uncomfortable as it may seem, you have to have people confront that reality.
Correct.
And that is people like you who are aware of that kind of challenge. How do we, get people to actually see what is in front of them? The last point I would like to make is what you have already mentioned. How do we put in place an accounting system that actually puts a marketable value on ecological services?
Completely. Or on ecology. Why only
Well,
services?
I mean,
I'm saying the point is that
every asset must have a marketable price.
I agree with that. I agree.
Unless you do that, if it is not put as a marketable value, it will continue to be
Completely.
eroded.
I agree with
And
you.
that is, I think, something that, and also not only putting a price on it, a marketable price, but also the discount rate.
Completely.
Okay. Today, the discount rate is about 4%.
Really.
Now, with 4% discount rate, present consumption is much more valuable than consumption down the line 10 years.
Correct.
So, intergenerational equity is completely sacrificed.
Completely. The intergenerational part is not actually understood or delivered by the government. No? Who cares about this 4%?
Forget
Really.
about government.
No,
What
but then
about society itself?
Society itself. I agree.
Earlier in this country, you used to always think about your next generation.
Correct.
Making certain that your children, your grandchildren had a better life than you had. Today, it's a me generation.
That's
You look after yourself. I have nothing to do with your fate.
Yeah.
I must make certain that I'm
Looked after well.
So how do you change that?
No,
And
completely.
this is also an economic problem. That what is the discount rate I'm using?
And the
Because the
rate is
discount rate
very-
is actually reflecting social choices, which is I value what I'm getting today much more than what I'll get 10 years down.
10 years down. No, that is absolutely.
So-
It's a good accounting methodology. It's also quite sort of reasonable to do. It's understandable. I think there's a last part which is linked with the first point that you gave. I think there's a cultural wheel which we must actually build into the system, especially in terms of design. I think whether design of a house, design of water systems, design of forest growing, design of clothing, design of food, I think is a very important cycle that we are working on and we want to launch.
No,
it this
well, I'm
time.
very glad that you're
So we're
working on
doing
that
what is
because-
called the cultural
Yeah.
wheel, which is an important part
Yeah.
of development.
Yeah, sure.
And therefore, that's really what we're doing based
Sure.
on the conversations we've had
Sure.
earlier. And we
Yeah.
will send you some of that. But I think that would be the fifth point,
Yeah.
which I would give emphasis on as a corollary to the
Yeah.
point one that
Yeah.
you've talked about.
And
indigenous
the
people.
advantage here in India is that actually it has been an embedded part of your culture and philosophy
Very good
for
point.
generations.
Yeah,
That's
true.
If you just look into the Vedas or you looked into the Upanishads, you look at even folk
Right.
traditions.
The whole Panchatantra and all
these
that
are
is all part
all
of this.
all are actually geared to that kind of a sustainable livelihood. So if we can tap into that, Indians say they are very devout and they are very religious. Okay, why don't you really look at what is really an integral part of that religion and of your traditions?
No, thank you.
Yeah.
That note, thank you, Mr. Saran, for always giving us time and giving us wisdom.
My pleasure.
I think we have to
And
implement
wish you
all of
all the
this.
very best, particularly for the forthcoming conference.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing you there soon.
Well,
Thank you. Thank you.